Can I take you to your first statement, Mr. Agostino? You've got a copy of it there, do you?
I have.
Now, paragraph 8, you say the 2001 and the 2003 agreement didn't allow for much flexibility, and you give some examples in paragraph 9 and following. So there were restrictions on the ability of Chiquita to direct workers to move from one shed to the other, is that right?
That is correct.
And you say that where one shed is, workers in one shed wouldn't call for help from the other shed because they were being rewarded by the piece rate system. Does that mean, in effect, the more you pick, the more you pay?
That's right. That was actually, it was clause 11 of the 2001 agreement, and it was subject to a dispute at the Industrial Relations Commission, where I called it legal industrial action.
Now, paragraph 12, you've now corrected, and you say, from what I recall, our work cover premiums were in excess of $6 million per year, and that's because there was a high rate of injuries.
That's right.
And what were the reasons for the injuries?
They were predominantly sprains and strains, and they came about because workers wouldn't disclose. They would take painkillers. They would doctor shop in order to keep picking.
Because the more they pick, the more they're paid.
That's right.
So there was an incentive, in a sense, to work too many hours, really.
Oh, yeah, we had cases where pickers were working 7 days, and we tried to stop that.
And out of concern for the workers, in part, I'm sure, but also because it drove the work cover premiums up to the amount that you've specified in 12.
Yes.
And you've also, you say you're losing close to 10,000 hours per year. And then, so you're saying 14, that disturbed you greatly?
Of course it did.
Yeah, of course it did. And so you introduced this the strategy of not replacing permanent employees, but using casual labour, and initially from West Staff, it looks like, but then from NLS, or Northern Labour Solutions.
That's correct.
So in 2003, you say Chiquita had 200 casual workers supplied by NLS on site. Now, do you have any conversation with the union about the strategy that you implemented, that you describe in 15?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Wasn't the union concerned about it, moving to labour? Labour hire?
We had quite a few people going off. Sorry, let me just rephrase that. The facility was divided in two parts. One part was with labour hire, and that was incorporated in the agreement. The other part was predominantly Chiquita employees. We lost 10,000 hours in 1 year, so somebody would go off injured and they'd be replaced by labour hire. So it was hard to monitor, and at different points they did have concerns, but we managed the situation.
Well, you say that you were concerned. I mean, it wasn't just the work cover premiums or the hours lost, although that was part of it. You also, I think you said you had concerns about the flexibility of the arrangements under the EBA, the 2001 EBA.
Absolutely.
And did you have discussion about that matter with people in the union?
Numerous times.
And who are you having the discussions with?
I had discussions with Frank Leo, I had discussions with Zoe Angus, I had discussions with Dr. Yossi Berger, and I got no traction. I had an EBA that was hurting our people, and it was hurting their business.
Well, let's take it in steps. Mr. Leo, and I gather this from his evidence the other day, he was the main organiser visiting the site. And Dr. Berger, was he also? What was his position?
He was the occupational health and safety expert with the AWU.
Lady, what was her name?
Zoe Angus.
And what was her position?
She was an industrial officer with the AWU.
And they all came and had visits to the site, did they?
Yes, at different
And you
times.
had meetings there with them?
Yes.
Did you go to the AWU offices yourself and have discussions?
Yeah, I did go to the offices at different times.
With whom did you have discussions when you went there?
Predominantly Frank Lear.
When you say predominantly, anyone else?
There was the work cover officer, Eddie Gent. There were other people there that I had a chat with at different stages, different officials.
I'm really trying to understand whether you were, this was something you were discussing with the union. Is this the shift from, well, the EBA that had the problems that you've articulated to a different arrangement?
No. There were always issues out of the farm, and there were quite a number of occasions that either I'd go there to discuss an issue, or Frank Leo would be at the site.
Discuss it with the secretary at all of the AWU?
Yes, I did have one meeting with him.
When was that roughly?
It was a long time ago. I can't recall. I can't.
Was it easier if I just say what was the topic you were discussing?
I'm not sure whether it was an introduction or how it came about. At one point, he said to me, "You have quite a few contractors on site. Why?" And I said, "I've got an EBA that's hurting our people and hurting our business, and it's restrictive." And that was the extent of the conversation.
What did he
I think
say?
he said words to the effect of, "Well, we'll see what we can do about that." And I'd heard it all before. You know, I took nothing from it.
You'd heard it before from Mr. Leo.
I'd heard everybody cared. Everybody cared until it was about addressing the people. When talking to the people, it was a totally different position. So
I'm sorry, I don't really follow that. Just say take me through slowly.
okay. I recall that I was trying to create an awareness of the risks and hazards in the workplace.
Among the workers?
Among the workers.
Yes.
Because they were sacrificing their health for financial gain.
Yes.
I'd heard about Dr. Yossi Berger, and I thought, okay, we're on the same page, and I invited him to speak at our Health and Safety Week, and he was very cordial and yes, and then he slammed the company in front of the people, saying that, you know, we were that we had a responsibility and we were not following through our responsibility. Zoe Angus would say one thing to me, and then at the commission described us as the market leaders of hurting people.
Who said that?
Zoe Angus. So I'd heard it before.
How does this arise?
And then, well, let's just keep working it through. So you've got your 2001 EBA.
Yes.
And you've had discussions with people in the union. So was it sometime after that you had the discussions with, Dr. Berger came and addressed the workers?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is just date it a bit more precisely.
Dr. Berger came not long after I started. I invited him out when we started the occupational health and safety campaign awareness.
And Ms. Angus spoke to you, but then made those comments in the commission. Was that in 2002 when the dispute was on?
That's absolutely right.
Right. And conversation with the secretary, when was that?
It's I would have thought that it might have been in 2003, late 2003.
Late 2003.
All right. But I can't be, as I said, it was a long time ago. I can't.
Of course. Let's keep working through your statement. So I think I was just asking you about the strategy that you make reference to in paragraph 15. And I was asking you, conversations that you had with the union about that strategy. And then, in fact, you pick up discussion about Mr. Leo in paragraph 16. And then you say, sometime in early to mid-2003, Mr. Leo came to see me. He complained he could not get the workers supplied by NLS to become union members and pay union dues. I told him this was an issue between the AW and the workers. He said, but we're missing out on revenue. And you said words to the effect, well, if that's what you're missing out on, we may be able to compensate you for that. Now, I know it's a long time ago, but can you remember where you were when you had that conversation?
I do.
Oh, okay. Where were you?
I was in the passageway near my office.
Was anyone else around?
No. I think he'd just come over from... he'd just come over from what we called A side, where the casuals were. And it was on a daily occurrence that he was fairly upset about the arrangement with NLS, how they were getting paid and everything else, and this was the latest one.
Well, and that's because of the strategy that you'd implemented to shift across to labour hire.
That's right.
Or at least labour hire with
no,
NLS.
they were independent contractors.
They're independent contractors, right. So you just had this conversation in the passageway, did you?
It was like, the conversation went like this. These guys are no good, they won't work with us. And I said, well, you know, what's the problem? And he said, I can't get them to work with us. They can't get their people to join up. And I said, how's that my problem? Because whether they join or not, that's their call. And he said, well, we're missing out on revenue. And how's that my problem? Well, we can't conduct training. And I said, well, I think we spoke about a figure. I said, put it in a letter to us and I'll see what we can do.
Well, in your note in paragraph 17, you don't make reference to him asking about a figure, but you think he probably raised that in the passageway.
We had that conversation in the passageway.
All right, so then, and what you say in 17 is that you said to him, well, if that's what you're missing out on, we may be able to compensate you for that. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, that's right.
Then you had a discussion with Mr. Little, and I'm now looking at 18, and you say we agreed, that's you and Mr. Little, I take it.
That's right.
That Chiquita would pay the AW $4,000. Now, that was the figure that Mr. Leo had nominated.
I'm not sure whether we nominated it or we negotiated it. I'd say I can't tell you how that figure seemed palatable to me. So,
well, did he tell you how he'd arrived at the figure he was negotiating on? No, I can't. Your understanding, and it's only your understanding, did it reflect the amount of revenue that they were missing out on?
Could have been. Yeah, I think we worked out a back of the envelope type, but it's what I recall is that the amount was palatable, right? So
palatable to Chiquita.
Yes, $4,000 was a small price to pay.
Yeah, a small price to pay for what?
A small price to pay to keep him at bay.
Sorry?
To keep him at bay.
Keep him at bay? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, we had over 200 independent contractors, and if...
You mean by that the people coming to do work from NLS?
That's right.
And what's the problem with that?
Well, independent contractors were a hot issue, and I thought, well, if this gets out, we're going to be in a bit of strife. The AW went backwards in coming forward and going to the media. The independent contractors were a hot issue at the time, and I never lied to Frank Leo, but he never asked me the right questions, so we just continued on.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
I found out we had independent contractors. They were employed under the Oddco arrangement. There were 200, in excess of 200. NLS engaged those 200 independent contractors.
Well, you've touched on this in your second statement, the one your statement dated 18 September. Can I take you to that and let's see if this teases it out a little more?
Yeah, sure.
If you go to paragraph, well, there's a heading paid education leave on above paragraph 15, and then really that you talk about the discussions you had with Mr. Leo regarding the payment of $4,000 for paid education leave, and you say it had nothing to do with EBA negotiations. Now, is that right?
Absolutely right.
Weren't you negotiating an EBA at the time, though?
We'd finished negotiating the EBA.
Well,
We had a 12-month interim EBA in practice.
you had your the 2003 was approved at some point, and then that more or less, I think Mr. Leo's evidence was to the effect that that implemented a 2% wage rise, and there were some changes, but in any event, that held the position for another year or so. So that had taken place.
That's right. There was a 2% pay increase, and there was a moratorium on the use of labour of contractors, so we could increase the number of contractors, and it gave us time.
Okay. Then, so you say this was a separate issue, was it?
This was an issue that he raised with me in the passageway about his relationship with NLS and not being able to, and the union missing out on revenue.
And then, so I'm now looking at paragraph 16 of your second statement. You say from December 2002 to January 2004, Chiquita Mushrooms utilised approximately 200 independent contractors provided by NLS. And then you say, as I understood it, Mr. Leo is having very little success in establishing a relationship with NLS, and you've really made that point in your oral evidence, and convincing the workers supplied by NLS to become AW members. Workers engaged by NLS were in fact independent contractors. And then you respond to something Mr. Leo said, because he said that you were unhappy with NLS, but you say that's not the case.
That isn't the case.
And you've set out the reasons why in paragraph 18, and then really coming to paragraph 19 is the point that you are making. The use of independent contractors, you say, is controversial. In any event, it was controversial at that time.
Certainly.
And you were very concerned that Mr. Leo would discover that Chiquita was using independent contractors and agitate Chiquita's in-house employees, resulting in disruption to production and jeopardise future negotiations. Now, what did you mean by that?
Well, we only had a 12-month agreement. I was certainly concerned about coming up to that agreement and getting that platform for change. I was concerned about the whole union movement coming down on Chiquita because we had so many independent contractors. The dispute that Mr. Leo spoke about the other day, that as a result of that dispute...
The 2002 dispute.
The 2002 dispute, we found ourselves in the press about us hurting people, right? And we didn't need that publicity. I was walking in my own personal life. When I told somebody I worked at Chiquita, a bloke said to me, you're the mob that hurts people. All
right, well, that's... so it was media, and in 19, when you talk about future negotiations, you're talking about the EBA, but you also say disruption to production. Now, what did you mean by that?
Well, Clause 11 talked about shed ownership. That gave the pickers control of those sheds. You alienate those teams, and they don't share, which increases your overtime bills, which increases exposure, which increases their risk to getting hurt.
But how would Mr. Leo agitate Chiquita's in-house employees, resulting in disruption to production?
I object to that. That's a leading question. An assumption is agitation.
Nothing leading about it at all, Commissioner. Again, how would he do it? And the matters are set out in Mr. Agostino's statement, to which my friend hasn't objected. How would he do it?
He would have meetings with the delegates. He would have meeting with the delegates at the teams. There would be disruption. there would have been resistance to having contractors coming on the main site.
And by disruption, do you mean industrial action?
I'm talking about industrial action. I'm talking about publicity. I'm talking about putting a loss of harvest.
And then
Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
I sat here the other day and I heard about the overpinning issue. The overpinning issue was raised in the Industrial Relations Commission.
Well, that was the 2002 issue, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yep.
The overpinning issue was raised as a health and safety concern. Overpinning is a phenomenon. It was admitted by all the parties that it's not a deliberate act. But what it resulted in was a slow pick. The AWU issued hazard alerts, not pin notices, hazard alerts instructing their pickers not to pick. We lost stock. So those sort of issues are the disruptions I'm talking about.
And you were anxious to avoid having disruptions of that kind.
Well, absolutely right.
And you're saying 20. The payment of $4,000 to the AWU seemed to me a small price to pay to avoid disruption to production arising from the use of independent contractors. But when you were making these payments, did you understand that you would be getting, or what did you understand you'd be getting for your $4,000?
I thought it was going to go, I was led to believe that it was going to be utilised for training, for their training programs.
Well, who said that to you?
Frank.
But did you get any training?
Well, I didn't necessarily, no, there was no training. And Stephen Little was incorrect in saying that the other day, but
Well,
it wasn't necessarily for us either. It was, I thought, for AWU training.
Training who?
Members, not only on our sites but other sites.
Well, let's take that in steps. You said that Mr. Little was wrong about that the other day. What do you mean by that?
Well, I heard Mr. Little say that he recalled a seminar. I was in charge of training. I certainly, there was no training provided to us by the AWU on site. There was a meeting that he was referring to and he might have been confused, but there was certainly no training conducted by the AWU on our site.
Well, are you aware, well, you said that there might have been training done by AWU of its members, or do you mean members at Chiquita, who work at Chiquita, or just members generally?
Members generally.
But are you aware of any yourself?
Look, when I went there, I did see that they were conducting some training down in Spencer Street. I think it might have been occupational health and safety training. But none of our members were involved. None of our employees were involved in that course.
But you just happened to notice some training being done. But you don't know whether that had any connection with your...
No, not with our money.
All you're saying is that on one occasion, or perhaps more than one occasion, you went to the AW offices and there was some training being done.
Yeah.
But, right.
That money wasn't for us. That money wasn't necessarily for training for us. It was. I thought when I agreed to it, I thought it was union training in whatever form they decided to train in health and safety.
Are you really just saying that you were paying this money to the union and they could use it as they wished?
For training.
For training, yes. But you don't know, you didn't get any information about what might have actually been done?
No.
Now, if we come back to your first statement, and I think I was dealing with 18, and then 19 is really where you say that you give some evidence about the training, and then you mention a letter of 5 August 2003. I take it you didn't keep a copy of that?
No.
Right, no. And then Chiquita sent a letter of 29 October 2003. Why did Chiquita send that letter?
It would have been requested, I would have thought,
Requested by who?
by Frank Leo, but look, I can't say certainly. I can't say for certainty.
I raise that because you said that your conversation...
Sorry.
No.
It would have been... there would have been governance issues. There would have been had to have been a letter from the union, and there would have been a letter for us agreeing to it.
Governance issues, you mean...
we were a public company. We had to... that money had to be traced.
I'm pretty slow, Mr. Stoljar. There was a letter of the 5th of August from Mr. Leo.
Yes.
And Mr. Little, on the 29th of October, 3 months or so later, thanks him for that letter and looks forward to working with the AWU in developing skills. That makes me think that the 5th of August letter espoused the ideal of the AWU helping to develop the skills of the employees. Is there anything more mysterious than what's on the face of the documents?
The reason I raised it, well, the first point is that the 5 August 2003 letter can't be found, Commissioner, whether by the AWU or Mr. Agostino. And what I was really asking was why, after receiving that letter on the 5th of August, that long period of time went by and that further letter was sent, whether anything triggered the sending of that letter.
Did anything happen after the 5th of August that triggered the sending of the 29th of October letter?
Commissioner, I think we might have made one payment in September.
Well, the reason I ask is
I can't recall.
The reason I ask is that you said earlier your conversation with the Secretary was in late 2003. And we're now moving into the period late 2003. I was wondering whether that had any...
Not from my knowledge, no. I never saw those two issues related.
All right, but you had the conversation around, well, you just simply said in late 2003, so it could have been before, could have been after, but in any event, it was sometime around then.
Yeah, it could have been. No, I think it would have been maybe possibly later than that.
And then you say that you started to receive monthly invoices, and then this is at tab 4. Can I just take you to that? It's page 27 in the bottom right-hand corner. Found that document?
No, but I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it.
Oh, it's on the screen, yes. Now that, so that I think is the first invoice, and it's the one I think you just mentioned to the Commissioner that you received prior to the letter of 29 October 2003. The description of the work is paid education, and then paid education for September 2003. But it's a little unclear what that means, but certainly doesn't refer to OH&S training. Come at it this way, did Chiquita Mushrooms receive any education services in the period in September 2003?
Not that I'm aware of.
The answer really no.
No.
And then did you have any discussions with anyone about this invoice?
No.
When you sent, or when Mr. Little sent the letter of 29 October 2003, did you have any further conversation with Mr. Leo or anyone else?
No.
So you just got this invoice in September 2003 and then...
Sorry. After our passageway discussion, I would have spoken about that to Stephen Little.
Oh, sure. You've covered that in your statement, yeah.
And then told Frank, yeah, fine.
Right. All right, so you're getting the monthly invoices and you say, I approve payment.
Yes.
And then the letter foreshadows a review of the arrangement in 6 months. Now, that didn't occur in the end, did it?
No.
Because after about 6 payments, you stopped paying.
That's right.
although you continue to receive invoices for some months,
but we didn't pay them.
and you just didn't pay them.
That's right.
And what happened to cause you to stop paying them?
Well, NLS, One Force were coming on board. Frank Leo said that they had a good working relationship, and I saw no need to continue paying it because their revenue. If they had a good working relationship and they encouraged union membership, why would I compensate them for loss of revenue?
Did anyone at the AWU complain about the fact you
No.
stopped paying? Did anyone chase you up about it?
No,
No correspondence?
no correspondence.
When did One Force? When did the One Force arrangement actually come into effect?
The first ones came in late 2002, but not in the picking area. There was certainly a persistence to have them engaged. So I put on some in some of the ancillary areas, such as cleaning or tray, forklift driving, those sort of areas.
These are the One Force
Yes.
people. Were they contractors?
No, they were labour hire.
They were labour. And when did the mushroom pickers start coming from One Force?
Around January, I would think. Around January, they started coming on board.
All right, now, you mean January 03 or January 04?
January 04.
That makes sense.
Can you, well, when was One Force first identified in a EBA?
In the 2004
The 2004
agreement.
Yeah. Now, in paragraph 24 of your statement, you're now working up to that period.
Statement one.
Oh, your
two.
first statement, yeah, sorry. Now, there's quite a number of changes in that 04 agreement, where you say it afforded Chiquita far more flexibility, that there were a minimum of 120 Chiquita employees, freeing Chiquita up to engage the remainder of its workforce through labour hire, abolition of shared ownership, changes to piece rates, etc., etc. So there are some pretty substantial concessions given by the AWU. What did you do in return? What did Chiquita do in return? Anything?
We gave the pickers an opportunity to get out. So we gave the opportunities to some of the pickers to parachute out of that role.
In the negotiations, was the fact that you're making the $4,000 payments, did that come up?
No.
Not at all.
Well, by that time, I think we'd stopped making those
yes,
payments.
you just about stopped. I'm sorry. Yes, because the 6-month period had come to an end. Yeah. You say in 25 that Mr. Leo suggested using One Force. Was anyone else present when he made that suggestion?
Could have been. He mentioned it several times. He mentioned Clark and Calica on quite a few occasions.
In the course of negotiations?
Well, when the first time he mentioned him was when I just started, and then during the time when I was removing West staff to give Clark a go.
You said that Chiquita had arranged for voluntary redundancies. Is that what you were saying?
That's right.
And that was all it did, Chiquita? I'm just wondering why was voluntary redundancies regarded as acceptable by the AWU, to your understanding?
Well, look, I'm not certain. It certainly was a lot more generous than what was in the agreement. A lot of the pickers, it had been a 2-3 year campaign to make people aware of the risks. The fact that we had so many labour hire as a result of the 2003 agreement had in effect reduced their hours and their income. So redundancies became a more attractive proposal for them.
Can you come back to, well, come to your second statement? You develop some of these points. You say in paragraph 4, I've been asked to provide more information regarding the number of pickers, and you give a figure for pickers at the two sites in 4A and B, and that adds up to 277. And one draws that from paragraph 5, and then in 2001 Chiquita engaged approximately 150 contractors supplied by labour hire company. And then paragraph 7, so pursuant to the 2004 agreement, the number of in-house employees that Chiquita Mushrooms were required to have was significantly reduced as follows: 90 at Mernda and 30 at Yarrambat. And then of course the paragraph 10, the number of contractors has gone up to 350. But if you go back to 7, the net result of all this is that the number of employees has gone down from 277 that we have in para 5 on the page before to 120.
That's correct.
And you're saying 9 that the employees accepted many employees who accepted voluntary redundancy packages were subsequently employed by OneForce.
Yes.
I mean, is really what we're talking about here people ceasing to be employees and moving across to OneForce?
No.
Complicated than that?
No, it was a lot more complicated than that. I mean, they chose who they engaged and who they didn't engage. It was quite a few people did go across, but many others didn't. Now
you're in 13. You've tried to give some estimates of what you call a flow-on effect, and you say you don't have records to quantify the reduction accurately, but you estimate it was over 3.5 million per annum. Can you just explain that a little more? You said before that the work cover premiums were in the order of $6 million.
Yes.
And then,
so for every employee dollar that we paid, it was between 42 and 47% in work cover premium. By engaging a labour hire company, their work cover premium was 5%, and even if you factor in the case of OneForce 8%, instead of paying 42%. We're now down to 29%.
Is it really savings of that kind? Is that what you had in mind?
Oh no, that's just $3.5 million was just on the premium, right? Like, if you have a look at the 2000, and we're talking about the 2004 agreement, there were other things like the abolition of overtime rates on weekends and the introduction of a flat rate on the weekend. There were limits on the number of boxes that a person could pick, so it would slow them down and reduce the risk. So there are a whole heap of cost-saving factors.
Well, are you able to give an estimate of what the net effect on the payroll was by reason of those factors?
No, I can't.
But anyway, what, in the millions?
It would have been in the millions, yes.
And that's in addition to the 3.5 million on the premiums?
Yes.
And you were able to negotiate that in the 2004 EBA?
Yes.
And were those negotiations facilitated by the fact that you weren't having difficulties with the AWU?
I'd like to think they came on board.
Well, let me put it more bluntly, Mr. Agostino. Were those negotiations facilitated by the fact that you'd been paying the AWU the $4,000 a month?
No, not at all.
Well, you said that was to alleviate or prohibit any disruption.
The $4,000 was to move away the attention of the independent contractors.
Well,
I don't think the $4,000. I think the fact.
Well, can I just take you to paragraph 19 of your statement?
First statement or the second
Your
statement?
second statement. And you say, I was very concerned that Mr. Leo would discover that Chiquita was using independent contractors and agitate Chiquita's in-house employees, resulting in disruption to production and jeopardise future negotiations. Now, that was your concern at about the time that the arrangement was entered into.
Yes.
And you told me before, as I understood it, that the negotiations were in respect of the EBA that was coming up, being the 2004 EBA.
That's right.
And so I'll put it to you again, those negotiations were for the 2004 EBA were facilitated by the payment of the $4,000 a month. That's right, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it inevitably follows from the evidence that you've given already today.
I think it was maintaining a good relationship, but I don't think the $4,000 had an impact on that EBA.
Mr. Agostino, you say it yourself, don't you, in 19, that you were concerned about jeopardising future negotiations, and you say, and you told me earlier that those negotiations with the 2004 that you had in mind were the negotiations with the 2004 EBA.
Yes.
And as a result, you started paying $4,000 a month.
Yes.
And $25,000 was a small price to pay for the having a much smoother path for those negotiations. That's right, isn't it? I say 25,000, meaning 6 lots of 4,400 roughly.
Yes.
So you accept that the payment of the 25,000 was a small price to pay for the facilitating the negotiations for the EBA.
No, the $4,000 was a small price to pay to avoid disruption and maintain a good working relationship with the AWU. I think that one of the big things in regards to the 2004 agreement was the movement towards one force and away from NLS.
Oh, quite. The 2004 agreement, I can see from the point of view of Chiquita, was favourable. It saved you, or the consequences of it saved you very significant amounts in both payroll and premium, correct?
Yes.
Not so good for the workers because they didn't get the same rates of pay that they'd been getting under the previous EBA. Payroll is less.
In regards to financial, but in regards to their health, I'd beg to disagree.
But in any event, they didn't get that option any longer of doing the piece rate. If they were good to continue to do the work, they had to go across to one force.
That's right.
But
the agreement was voted on by the workers.
But Mr. Leo wasn't doing what you refer to in paragraph 19, namely agitating Chiquita's in-house employees, resulting in disruption to production. He wasn't doing that, was he?
No.
Didn't do that in the 6 months that you were paying the $4,000, did he?
No.
Who signed off on the 2004 EBA? Was it the Secretary?
I think it was.
And did you have any discussion about it with the Secretary in the period leading up to the signing of it?
Well, I think it was that discussion late in 2003, that general discussion. But as I said earlier, I didn't take it here or there. It was just a...
Who were you negotiating the 2004 EBA with? Was it Mr. Leo alone or Mr. Leo and others?
Sorry, it was Mr. Leo and the delegates. There were 3 delegates.
And who were they?
Binker, Binka Stojanevska, Barb Stevens, who was the senior delegate, and Deirdre Riley.
Do you have any recollection of how many workers took voluntary redundancy?
No.
And do you have any recollection of how many workers that you're getting from One Force were formerly employees of
No.
Chiquita? A substantial number?
No, I can't comment. I know that we were 10 short. We were in regards to the redundancy target, and we had 3 on the last day, and there were 7 others.
Did you tell the workers at Chiquita about the $4,000 a month payment?
No?
And was that because you didn't want them to be concerned about the fact that Chiquita was paying the AW direct?
I didn't think it was a consequence. I didn't think there was anything inappropriate about it. If the matter had come up, I certainly would have told them.
I'm sorry, I'm just reminded of something that I should correct. I was asking you who signed the EBA.
It's the Assistant Secretary.
Yes, I'm just checking. I think I asked you whether the Secretary had signed it.
Yeah.
And
Signed off was the expression.
signed off, yes.
Difference between signing and signing off.
Yes. I think there may be some...
Page 55, I can't read the signature.
Yes, I think that's...
The 2004 agreement?
On page 55, that's the Assistant Secretary, is it? That's the pickers.
I don't know. I don't know who Stavroli Redis is.
And then...
Deirdre Riley was a delegate. Binka was a delegate. And Frank Leo's the bottom signature, and I signed it. That's my signature on the right.
Yes.
Whose is the first signature on page 55? Can you read that?
Sorry, Commissioner?
On page 55, first signature, whose is that? Of the words Assistant Sec.
I think it looks like there's Mellon's.
Did you have discussions with Mr. Mellom about the $4,000 a month payment?
No,
Did he sign it because the Secretary wasn't around, or was away or on leave?
don't know.
There was a folder of documents received into evidence on the last occasion, Commissioner, marked MFI1. Could I take it, Mr. Agostino, to it'll come up on the screen if a hard copy isn't available. Tab 14, page 344. Now this, just so you know, this is the EBA for the administrative staff, as distinct from the pickers.
I noticed you said this last time at the meeting the other day.
Yes.
This is it's not for the administrative staff, it's for the ancillary staff. So forklift drivers, there was no agreement covering the administrative staff.
I see. So this is ancillary staff such as forklift drivers and the like. How many of them were there?
About 100.
And was the position similar with those staff in that some of them took voluntary redundancies and you started replacing?
No.
They remained full-time employees, did they? So they weren't affected by this arrangement?
There was certainly some that were replaced with labour hire through One Force as they left.
Some ancillary staff?
Yeah.
So you started getting ancillary staff from One Force as well?
Well, that was my evidence earlier. That's how they got in.
Right. And so I just want to clarify who was the signatories. Signing page is on page 344.
Yes.
And that was signed on behalf of the AWU by the then Secretary and Mr Little on behalf of Chiquita. And then we've looked at the Pickers agreement a moment ago and saw that it was signed by Mr Mellon and others. Nothing further, Commissioner.